Welcome to this first of two special editions of ABNcast, brought to you from Aerospace Tech Week, which is taking place this week in Munich in Germany. My name's Lee Hayhurst. I'm Editorial Director of Aviation Business News, and I'll be talking to some of the key people who are attending this week's show about the topics and debates, and in particular about the technology that will shape the future of the industry. First up, we've got Willie Walsh, Director General of IATA, who joined me for a quick chat after he came off stage having given the first opening keynote. Okay, so I'm delighted to be joined now by Willie Walsh, who is the Director General of IATA, very well known in the industry, obviously formerly of IAG and BA. Welcome, Willie, and welcome to Munich. You've just come off stage delivering this morning's keynote interview, and you talked about a lot of things, but what I took from it generally was a real sense of frustration amongst the industry and from IATA's point of view, that there's a lot going on, a lot of pressure being put on the sector, particularly around sustainability, from people, from organisations that do not really understand the industry as well as maybe should do, and either have higher expectations or don't really understand the impact of what they want you to do as a sector. How does that change? Because there are things happening today, and you mentioned Schiphol, for instance, where it is going in one direction, and so there doesn't seem to be that coming together of minds. Can that change? Are you, as IATA, desperate to make sure that you educate everybody about what the aviation sector is like?
Yeah, I think you've made an excellent point. We're dealing with very important issues at the moment, and I think it's very important at this stage to base our decisions on data, on facts, and not on hyperbole. I commented and gave some examples, one being the push within some places in Europe to reduce short-haul flying. So you look at what's happened in France and in Spain, where people believe if we stop short-haul flying, we'll somehow address the environmental challenge of the industry. The data tells you something completely different. About 80% of all CO2 produced from the industry is from long-haul flying. And in fact, Eurocontrol did an excellent study which showed that if you stopped all flights in Europe of less than 500 kilometres, you would reduce the number of flights by 24%, which is very significant. But the CO2 reduction would only be 3.8%. So I think when decisions like this are being taken, it's critical that we understand the data and we understand what the consequences of the decisions we're taking are. And IATA has a very important role to ensure that we're speaking on these issues, we're highlighting the data, we're highlighting the facts. If you like, that we're educating people so that sensible, fact-based, data-based decisions can be taken at this important time.
Yeah. The word existential was used on stage maybe more than once, and a panel that followed yours as well that talked about sustainability. Because we're heading towards the 2030 targets for CO2 reduction, but then ultimately net zero 2050, and if the industry cannot do that, there's a feeling it could be an existential crisis for the sector. So it's really that important what we're talking about here, isn't it? Do you feel there's an existential battle here? I mean, there are those who just want less flying, and obviously that seems like a logical way to reduce the impact of the industry. But like you're saying, that's not necessarily the answer.
No, I think it is existential. I've used that word myself. So today, aviation contributes about 2 to 2.5% of man-made CO2. There are non-CO2 impacts, which are very important as well. I think the science around that is less well understood. So we're not trying to minimize our impact in the environment, but what is important, however, is that we understand what the economic contribution of aviation is, because you can't capture the economic contribution if you stop flying. And I think it is very important that we have a balance here. We clearly have to address our environmental footprint, and we are absolutely committed to doing that. We've put forward what I believe is a credible pathway to net zero in 2050. Now, it's not the only pathway, and I'm sure things will change as we get there, but 2050 is absolutely critical, and achieving net zero is an absolutely essential target for the industry, and we're committed to doing that.
India was mentioned on stage in terms of the amount of effort they're putting into their aviation sector as a generator of growth, economic growth, prosperity, and so on. So if this is going to happen, as you said, I think demand is only going to go one way. Even in Europe, it's going to go one way. But you look at what's happening not obviously in India, but clearly China as well. This is a global effort, and the industry is not going to go away all of a sudden, isn't it? So there needs to be a collaborative effort on this.
Yeah, that's very important. It is a global issue. We have to deal with it on a global basis, and often the debate in Europe focuses on what we have in Europe. You know, we do have a reasonably good rail network in some parts of Europe, but when you look at other parts of the world, and I give India as an example, you know, it's a massive country. The demographics of that country are absolutely fascinating. Most populous country in the world, very young population, growing middle class. The economy of India is growing as well. Probably 7th largest economy in the world today, aspires to be in the top 3. And aviation is going to be critical to unleashing the economic potential that exists there. I spoke with Peter Elbers, the CEO of Indigo. They fly to 88 airports in India. There isn't a rail network or a road network that can do what aviation can do for India, and it's absolutely essential that they be allowed to get the economic contribution and benefit that aviation has delivered to Europe and the US and other developed economies.
So we're here this week in Hamburg to talk specifically about tech. It's Aerospace Tech Week. Are you a big believer in the power of technology to solve these problems, and where do you think it's going to make the biggest difference in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and everybody talking about AI. Now, I'm not an expert, but I see AI as representing a huge opportunity. Clearly, there are some threats with it as well. I think we've got to understand the potential of AI, and we've got to understand the risks. But when I see the data that this industry has, and what we can do with that data, and what AI and machine learning will enable us to do, to improve the efficiency, the safety, the environmental footprint of the industry, I'm really excited.
We run a magazine called MRO Management, and technology is a big part of the maintenance and repair, the operational side of the industry, and that contributes to efficiencies and actually, in the end, to customer service, because if you're going tech less often and you're running your aircraft more effectively, you have fewer issues at the front end. We also run a conference called the Predictive Aircraft Maintenance Conference, which is actually clearly all about technology and what AI can do, and ML and data mining, etc. What do you think technology can do in those areas? They're not necessarily well. It's not going to be sort of consumer facing, so it doesn't get the sort of publicity that other aspects might. But what is that where the big gains potentially are in the back end?
I believe it is. Predictive maintenance you've mentioned, and I think consumers can see the benefit of that, because the beauty of predictive maintenance is you repair the piece of equipment before it fails, and often consumers experience delays because of a failure just before the aircraft departs. With predictive maintenance, these issues can be highlighted well before the part fails and can be replaced and swapped out before there is a failure. So I think predictive maintenance actually represents a significant opportunity for the industry. We have seen some benefit from it already, but I think we're only scratching the surface based on the data we have been using. And when you compare that to the data that's available to us and the way AI and machine learning has developed, in the even in recent months, never mind in recent years. So it's clearly going to be an opportunity for the industry, and I do strongly believe consumers will see the benefit from that as well in terms of greater reliability from airlines.
And there's obviously technology in what we were talking about a minute ago, and sustainability with sustainable aviation fuels. We've spoken to 2 companies recently, one that is developing tech to make SAF out of household waste, another one out of human waste, sewage. So there's all these ideas cropping up, often in the UK, to be fair. There's a lot of innovation in the UK. It's an innovative country. Are you confident that these sort of technologies will come to the fore quickly enough, be adopted quickly enough to solve the problems that we're facing?
Yes, I am, and you're quite right. The technology exists. This isn't rocket science. In fact, much of the technology has been around for many years. We're just piecing it together. The feedstock available for the creation of sustainable aviation fuel is actually quite widespread. So I think this is a fascinating area, and it's one where governments are beginning to recognize the opportunity, because clearly if you can produce fuel from waste products, you're reducing your reliance on importing fuel, you're generating jobs that are clearly sustainable. It's a green, if you like, industry, and you're improving the environment. So I think very exciting to see what's happening.
You're obviously asked on stage to talk about what's been going on at Boeing recently, and that feeds into another area of supply chain challenges that the industry has faced. And also there was a degree that the same theme came out there, was that maybe people don't really understand what's been going on in the industry generally, and naturally that the industry has just had its safest year on record. So fears about safety are sort of unfounded in terms of we're not moving into a more unsafe area for aviation. In fact, the opposite is the case. How does the industry just address that? I know you are confident Boeing will sort out its problems, but then it does reflect on the industry more widely, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I think everybody in the industry wants to see Boeing address these issues. The industry is very safe. We learn from experience. We learn from what we get wrong. We're very open about the issues that we face. We investigate every mistake, every incident, to ensure that we can learn and ensure it doesn't happen again. And it is important to point out that 2023 was the safest year in the history of aviation. 2022 was the second safe year, and I've no doubt that 2024 will improve on 2023 again. So, consumers can rest assured that the industry works extremely hard to maintain and enhance the safety performance of the industry. And we do this by making sure we're very open, discussing all of the challenges we face, sharing the learnings from those challenges to ensure that everybody can learn and make sure we don't see a repeat occurrence. But I'm very confident that we will continue to see enhanced safety and security as we move forward.
And just before I let you go, one quick final word. We talked technology, obviously very important, but we're an industry of people as well. I mean, tens of thousands of people operate the aircraft and the airline industry day in, day out. There has been a talent shortage. You'll be more than aware of that. Is that being solved? It's a long-term generational issue potentially, isn't it? So how do we solve this as an industry? Tech will play its part, but we're still going to need good people, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely critical. And in fact, the area where I think we do need to focus on is making our industry more attractive to women, particularly in areas that are being traditionally male-dominated: pilots, mechanics, technicians, engineers. We're still not doing enough there. It is a generational issue, as you say, because we've got to convince young kids, young boys and girls, not just young boys, but boys and girls, that this is an industry that offers them opportunities, and ensure that we're attractive to everybody. Because if we're not, then we will face a major challenge in attracting the right sort of talent and sustaining talent within the industry as we go forward.
Perfect. Okay. Willie, I'll let you go. I know you're busy, so thanks very much for your time this morning, and good luck with everything. Enjoy the rest of the time at the show.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. So now I've been joined by Cormac Walsh. Cormac is the aerospace industry lead at Norcloud, which is an IBM company. He's just come off stage presenting a short presentation about the move to cloud, about technology and about skills in the industry. Welcome, Cormac. Thanks for joining us on ABNcast. You had a very clear message you only had 15 minutes, but you had a very clear message. Just tell the listeners what that message was about the move to cloud and why it's so essential.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Primarily the message is that apart from the fact that the move to cloud is inevitable for enterprises of any type, not particularly airlines or airports, but the move to cloud acts as a competitive advantage if it's done correctly. So the pace at which new features are being added by the different hyperscalers, in particular AWS, Microsoft Azure and Google, the pace at which features are being added produces a situation where enterprises need to be at the leading edge of the curve from a skills perspective to be able to get the best out of these features to improve their operations. Now, to do this, you're not going to be able to do it with a legacy mindset at all. And you have to embrace the idea that the future marketplace for talent acquisition, talent retention, demands that any enterprise is going to take these kind of approaches. And this is the message that we're pushing towards the airline industry, is that if you want to be at the front and if you want to have a competitive advantage in terms of your technology portfolio, if you want to be that agile company that you always promised yourself that you were going to be, you got to go cloud and you got to build AI.
And the very clear message you gave was it's about build, not buy. There's no point buying an AI product off the shelf and hoping that that's good enough and that will see you through the future and future-proof your business. You called it an AI factory, I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
So you've got to actually create the ability in-house to adapt. You said be agile, which is exactly what you're talking about here. That's quite a daunting prospect potentially. I suspect a lot of sort of fairly conservative businesses would think, oh, let's just buy a fully fledged product, plug it in and make it work. The idea that you're off on your own, building your own things, I guess could be quite daunting. Is that one of the barriers to doing this?
Yeah, that's true, and of course there would always be some teething problems and pains at the start of any major transition like this. But the reality is that the speed at which capabilities are being added to AI technical portfolios means that if airlines take an approach to buy ready-made AI solutions, could even be on-prem or in the cloud, these solutions will get out of date extremely quickly. And you, in this model of embracing agility and embracing DevOps and DevSecOps and upskilling people, you have to let people fail fast. You have to let people experiment with different technologies. This is the only way that you can discover potentially the undiscoverable, identify use cases and interventions and solutions that have never even crossed your mind. This is where genuine innovation comes from, and real competitive advantage can take a foothold.
Failing fast in an aviation sector that prioritises safety above everything else sounds like a risky prospect potentially, I guess, if you don't really understand what that means. So when you say fail fast, what are the guardrails around that in an industry that really needs to put safety at the top of its priority list?
Well, the airline industry is not alone in paying attention to safety or security. So, for example, like globally and in Europe in particular, banks are almost rushing into cloud, and equally, European governments are taking the same steps. So, security in the cloud is no different than on-prem security in the sense that it's secure as you operate your own security operations. It's not going to be automatic. In the case of AI, you wouldn't want to expose your sensitive corporate information to any publicly hosted LLM. In that scenario, everything you have could potentially be exposed to the open internet. So it's a question of experimenting with these technologies, but doing it in a secure fashion. So, for example, in cloud, having a secure AI isolated landing zone. So effectively, you could almost view it like a private cloud within public cloud, where all of your data is kept corralled in one place.
You gave one example in particular you gave during your little speech earlier was airports in particular, and you mentioned India in particular because the booming demand for aviation is simply not going to be kept pace with in terms of the airline capacity, which is geographically constrained, and so you need to be operating far more effectively and efficiently. So that's one example. Any other sort of examples spring to mind where you think this technology is ready and available to make a big difference today?
Yeah, I think immediately. So some of the work that we're involved in is in delay prediction and mitigation. It's a relatively low-hanging fruit to crack. I know that some people in the aviation industry might disagree with me strongly, but from the analysis that we've done so far in terms of most of the data sets which are available in the overall turnaround operations of an airline, once the different stakeholder information data are brought together, it is possible to understand the genesis of a delay and how it can metastasize or grow from gate to gate, onto ramp, into holding pattern, and onto a different airport. Now, the reduction and the elimination of some delays which can be intervened in produces an enormous potential cost benefit for airlines, where in the worst case, a fully cancelled aircraft can cost hundreds of thousands of euros. Additionally, there's the ESG benefits of saying that we're reducing delays, and that has a knock-on effect of reducing our carbon footprint. That's a strong message. And then, of course, there's the financial saving and the customer experience and customer satisfaction.
We've got a particular interest at ABN in how this applies to engineering, and we run annual event called the Predictive Aircraft Maintenance Conference, PAM Conference, which we've just announced is moving into Dublin this year in November. And we were talking there about how cloud, AI, ML, and so on can really impact the operational side, and that feeds into the disruption which you just mentioned. You don't want to be going tech that often, and that's particularly important these days because if you're operating in Europe, you will have to pay a compensation if you go tech. So these things do play into the front end. They seem very back end. They seem very technical, but actually there's an impact at the front end with customer service, etc.
For sure. Yeah.
So that's important. So that's why the aviation industry needs to address this.
It's incredibly tangible, the effect on the front side, and I think fundamentally the approach that we have of all of our stories in and around AI is it's not to add new sensors or add new data or even to a degree add new interfaces. What we're talking about is using the readily available data which can be garnered by an airport authority, or in some cases even by an airline, and using it in a way which produces value which otherwise is just evaporating and will never be enjoyed. So I think that overall the industry has reached a technological inflection point in terms of the cost of computing and the ubiquity of computing, and the speed at which new capabilities are being launched means that we're going to see a golden age now in terms of the technological intervention in the overall customer experience and quality of the airline business.
Something you hear talked about quite a lot in this area is digital twins and having essentially a digital version of your airline. Not just the kind of metaverse type thing, but actually to every nut and bolt on every aircraft, because every aircraft is slightly different. And you can suddenly see how that is really powerful and really practical. Is this only possible now because of cloud? This simply wouldn't have been able to have done this in a pre-cloud era.
It would have been too expensive, and it would have been incredibly difficult for companies to individually develop these capabilities themselves. We have to appreciate the fact that once a feature is developed by one of the major hyperscalers, at some point it becomes available to every single customer on that hyperscaler. So development costs effectively evaporate, and the ability to be agile, like I mentioned earlier, live that dream, be agile, embrace DevOps. This means that you can then start to find the undiscovered country.
Yeah, and finally, before we finish, Norcloud. What do you do in this area? Cloud, the cloud and the name obviously suggests exactly what you do. But what do you do? If an aviation company wants to move to the cloud, how do you help them as a company?
Yeah, so we start from the strategic viewpoint. So we look at cloud governance and wave planning for migration. We will move our clients into the cloud, and then at that point we can, modernize to the correct extent into cloud native technologies on the workloads that we have migrated. So now they're starting to live that cloud dream and use native technologies in cloud, and then we manage their infrastructure. Yeah. So effectively, our clients are going to get the cost benefits of moving to cloud, the agility benefits, and then also the improved experience in terms of IT support. So that's our core business, and we do this for lots of industries globally, but in particular the airline industry is something which is growing really nicely.
Yeah, and finally, although you make the case for this being almost like a no-brainer, why wouldn't you do it? Although you have to do it in order to sort of survive in the future. It doesn't come without cost. If you get it wrong, it can be painful. Mm-hmm. So what are the challenges that you help companies overcome?
Failed promises are some of the main challenges. Yeah, there have been a lot of cloud migrations which have been quite naively planned and embarked upon. So, for example, assuming that security was just a given, but not appreciating the shared security model in cloud. Assuming that cost savings are guaranteed, but not having a proper governance model in place. Assuming that everybody is going to, everybody inside your organization is no longer going to launch shadow IT, Well, that's because you haven't properly publicized the capabilities and features and service levels of your cloud offering internally. So there can be a lot of disappointment and sticker shock, but it is all correctable.
Yeah. Cormac, thanks for that, and thanks for joining us today. Appreciate your time, and have a good show.
Thanks, Lee.
Cheers.
Will do.
Thank you. Okay, so next up for ABN Cast from Aerospace Tech Week, I'm joined by Andrew Coleman. Andrew is the President and the General Manager, Aerospace Software as a Service for GE Aerospace. Now, welcome, Andrew.
Thank you.
You were on stage earlier talking about technology, AI, machine learning in relation to the aviation sector. Before we go into that, just you've had some big news yourself as GE recently. We've been covering it and getting it out there into the wild. Just to explain what's been going on at GE, what's the big news?
We had a really, really big moment not that long ago after a lot of preamble. I mean, 100 and nearly 25 years as a conglomerate, maybe the original conglomerate business, touching everything from, at one point, appliances to capital to television to light bulbs to aviation to power to healthcare. And the no regrets decision our chairman made was, in the year 2024, we feel like focus probably beats diversification. And with focus, the amount of depth we're able to really go in our industry, aviation, but in our peer companies in the power and the overall just challenges faced as we try to decarbonize the planet, healthcare, the 1 billion patients GE will touch this year, instead of having a corporate debate for where capital goes and where we invest in spreading bets, the belief was, let's go stand on our own, and with that comes a level of accountability. Maybe we didn't feel before, I think we always had, but now we feel. But also a level of responsibility, and frankly, a level of enthusiasm. I would argue we all got to be founders in a pretty neat company last week.
What is there a sort of general theme around what you've done in terms of what businesses are becoming in the modern age?
Sure. So in our case, we start every Monday with our purpose statement. We invent the future of flight, lift people up, and bring them home safely. And for all the change in GE, I dare say that's not going to change. This is what we do in GE Aerospace, and that ranges from 3 out of 4 flights you would see are powered by our technology. But behind the scenes, as we talked about this morning, the amount of data we are seeing generated in our industry that not that long ago was viewed as a liability. What am I going to do with all this? How do I store it? How do I sort it? To now, oh my goodness, this is gold to lower my carbon footprint. This is just an amazing asset to raise the bar in flight safety. This is an unbelievable opportunity for me to make things that have been highly inefficient and even frustrating to passengers, like that word delay and cancel, a thing of the past. So we're pretty excited.
And you shared a stage earlier. You were the opening panel discussion, weren't you? I think you came after Willie Walsh, who we spoke to earlier on ABN Cast, and you were looking at the applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning in aviation, particularly around sustainability. But actually, the conversation went quite broad in many ways, as you just reflected on then, that it can be used in all sorts of areas, but sustainability is one. Where do you think the biggest gains are to be had today with this technology? Because everyone thinks it possibly is in the future and it's only going to be coming 10, 20 years down the line, but actually there are things you can do today, isn't there? I mean, if you're not doing it today, you're probably behind the curve.
Yes, and I think blockchain gave us a little bit of hype. I'd multiply this by about 10x, what we're seeing in terms of hype.
I've heard word blockchain mentioned for a long time. I don't know why, but
But think about the buzz that was there. I think the AI buzz is 10 to 20x what the blockchain buzz was. And so the trap, when you have that much buzz, is everybody wants you to think big, and how you're going to go change the world. As I talked about this morning, I don't think for a second the Wright brothers thought, I'm going to power a flight to the moon. It's I'm going to power a flight and I'm going to start something that's pretty amazing. So we're taking the same approach. We are blessed with, I believe, the richest library of flight data on the planet, over 55,000 years of flight data. And so with that, we have a wealth of knowledge to glean a lot of insight, but we're going pretty small. And we're working with a handful of customers to say, all right, from that, what can we do? Again, this data is not our data, it's our customers' data. We're trusted with it, but we're trusted to do innovative things like take advantage of AI. We talked a little bit about predictive maintenance. This space has been talked about for years, but the tools didn't exist. The openness didn't exist. I think that's all changed.
Predictive maintenance is one of our pet topics.
Yes.
As ABN listeners will know, because we run the Predictive Aircraft Maintenance, or PAM, conference coming to Dublin this year. We just launched this week, so look out for that. And it is fascinating what AI can do in that area. One thing that came out of last year's event actually was, I think it was EasyJet talking about how much effort had to go in from their behalf to get the buy-in from pilots, for instance. So I think I think the guy said he's got 9 pilot unions to deal with, right?
Sure.
So all these guys had to be on side because this technology does change the way people operate potentially. There's a degree of skepticism, maybe even cynicism, maybe even concern about what it does demonstrate.
Yes.
And I think you gave an example earlier, didn't you, about Qantas?
That's right.
So explain what happened there and why suddenly it was adopted by those pilots.
So for our industry buzz on safety, which is real and totally something we believe in, I feel like Qantas has been a pioneer in flight safety, maybe the safest airline on the planet. And because of that belief, when we start doing work in any space, we always start there. As we talked about on the panel, they early on said, we feel like it's time to flip the paradigm of where data lives, where it historically lived in the home office in a data center. We want to put it in the front line with the pilots. And so for 2 years, we worked in a very tight relationship directly with the pilots, getting through the skepticism of this data is going to exist to punish me or to tell me how to fly differently. And yet we found the opposite. The data was used just like a trainer would use data for you and I to maybe get in shape, with pilots to show when you approach this airport the last 3 times, the wind conditions were as such, you're a little unstable. And so let's practice that in the simulator. We then take that same knowledge to say, when you fly this mission, we saw an opportunity after you landed, you turn one of those engines off and actually taxi in single engine, not dual engine. And while that's a tiny single event, if you do that through the course of a year, we're talking about some serious carbon savings.
Yeah. So there's applications in safety and sustainability.
And in that order, every time.
Yeah.
We always start with first, never jeopardizing the safety of a mission, but then after that, we look at clues. How can we make it more sustainable as well?
Yeah. Earlier we had IBM speak on ABNcast. Cormac was talking about how firms adopt cloud, and the reason they adopt cloud is to get into AI. And he was saying AI is all about actually creating your own AI products, not taking products off the shelf and applying them, because things are moving so quickly, you'll be out of date within months. So you really actually got to bring in the skills internally to do that as a company. What role does GE do in helping your customers to have their own AI capabilities? Because that seems to be going to be key to success in the future.
It's absolutely key, and I would echo his comments. We have a lot of tech firms doing some great things in the infrastructure to build out the cloud and build out basic AI. We're really proud to partner with Microsoft, a lot of the work they're doing. But what we find with the tech companies, good or bad, is their domain knowledge tends to stop at the tech and not into our industry. And when you talk to them about it, you're like, why don't you know more about the physics of an airplane or about how an MRO works? They're really honest to say, when we look at the addressable market, banking's bigger and governments are bigger and retail's bigger, and then we get to like number 10.
Bigger margins as well.
Yeah,
and
then we find you all, and we love your use cases, but your industry is just not that big. And so we find it's a perfect marriage. We come in with our knowledge of how the industry works, how airplanes work, and we build on top of their technology instead of trying to repeat the things they've done. Yeah. It's a pretty good partnership.
That speaks to this idea of collaborating, not just within the industry, but with any
That's right.
Stakeholders, the IBMs, Microsofts, obviously Google's, but all those other, there's a bunch of startups just outside here presenting here for the first time.
Some really progressive ones,
So some really good collaborations going on. And you were quite excited about that on the panel, because I think Lufthansa was saying things that you really like the sound of. Just talk about what collaboration looks like in the modern age.
I love, because we talk about sustainability and everybody wants to go to net zero in 2050, and there's no way you can get there, it's impossible, and there's all the good reasons. But yet on the panel we talked about, just because you don't have the perfect line of sight to the end, why not start with a baby step? And so Lufthansa talked about, you could build a software application for a rounding error. And that software application could, and we've seen this, take 1 or 2% of the carbon out of the air. It's not 100%, but it's a step in the right direction. That application, as we talked about, could eliminate 1,000 cancels this summer. That's a big deal to passengers trying to go see family or businesses trying to connect. And so again, small steps, I believe, can lead to big things. One of the things I mentioned on the panel I love that GE allows our business to do, we don't exist just to serve people that happen to buy GE engines. We exist to serve our customers whatever their fleet is today. Yeah. We're going to make it better and better and better. And over time, we think that bet is going to endear ourselves to our customers to do whatever they want.
There was a really Airbus in your panel.
Yes.
Came up with this really interesting idea of aircraft flying like flocks of birds to save energy, so flying in the wake of, if you like birds do, because and birds do it to save energy, so it works for them. Why not for the aviation sector? Well, again, obviously that changes everything about how you fly. There's got to be a lot more automation involved in that.
Sure. And partnering.
Do you see that happening? Sort of flocks of aircraft flying overhead? Or it's obviously a way of moving that dial just a little bit. It makes a big difference.
I think there's crazier ideas that have made it into the real world, so why not?
Yeah.
I love the thinking.
Yeah. It's innovation, and this is what this week's all about. Look, our time is up. Quick one, but just a quick thought on the future. You're obviously extremely enthusiastic about not only the industry but what technology can do. Where do you think we are in 24? Do you feel there's an optimism about moving into a new age now? COVID behind us, and probably a focus on the future. The money's there to invest, and we're going forwards.
I'll start by making it personal. I found this industry 8 years ago after 20 years in the tech industry. I would have missed my calling in life had I not found this industry. I share that because what I'm finding as we're growing our team and hiring, people that would have gone to Google or Amazon or Microsoft are falling in love with our purpose. They would have maybe been a pilot or a data scientist. They're saying, maybe I can mix the two and come help this industry decarbonize, help connect people in ways that, frankly, the internet never connected people, the phone never connected people. And so with that influx of talent, I think the problems we're talking about today, that there's no way you could solve them, I just don't buy it. So in 2040, I see these problems getting solved, is my short answer.
I mean, that's a great point. It's a point close to our heart as well, ABM, because we've launched something called Best Places to Work in Aviation, and that is exactly about sort of trying to help the aviation sector portray itself as a great place to have a career. And of course, the young, talented, techie people, they're looking around to what sector is going to give them what they want. And I'm not sure aviation has really been out there competing for that.
But
now
I'll give you a data point.
It is.
In the last 12 months, because I look at our attrition every month, rolling on a 12-month, it's under 1% in our business. You cannot find a software company on the planet where it's under about 20%.
Yeah.
And I think that says something to what we're working on. It's pretty powerful.
It's interesting. I've spoken to a few people in tech, once or twice, and it's a little. A lot of people take their inspiration from the Musks of this world. You know, for a long time, everyone's been in software. They've been doing things on Facebook or social, and it kind of moves. It kind of does a little bit of change. It does something, but enabling people to share pictures of cats can only get you so far.
That's right.
But once you get into software that actually affects the real world, the physical, the hardware, you're creating product. That's getting excited about that, and that's what aviation offers.
That's why I joined GE Aerospace, and that's why I joined this industry. Exactly.
Yeah. Good.
Yep.
Look, Andrew, great to meet and great to speak.
Likewise.
Thanks for joining us on ABN Cast. That's it for today's edition. We'll do one more tomorrow with 3 more speakers, so look out for that. Thanks again to Andrew, and have a great show. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Cheers.